I stand in the doorway of my own home as my daughter-in-law Tiffany screams at me. She's red-faced, furious, pointing toward the street. "It's my house now, old man! Get out! Get out!" She physically shoves me through the doorway. I stumble onto the porch with only a small bag of belongings. The door slams behind me with a thunderous crack. Neighbors are watching. But I'm not panicking. Instead, a small, knowing smile crosses my face. She has no idea what I did earlier that week. No idea at all. The buyer will arrive soon. Let me take you back 18 months to where this nightmare really started. My name is Benjamin, and I'm 67 years old. I never imagined I'd be standing on my own porch as a homeless man, but life has a way of surprising you in the cruelest ways possible. My son David died on a Tuesday morning in March. He was 38 years old, healthy as a horse, ran 5 miles every morning before work. The medical examiner called it a sudden heart attack. No warning signs, they said. These things just happen sometimes, they said. But I'm his father. I knew something wasn't right. David had been married to Tiffany for 3 years. They'd met at a charity fundraiser where David volunteered. She was beautiful, charming, attentive. She swept him off his feet within weeks. Looking back now, I realize how fast everything moved. They were engaged after 4 months, married after 8. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now I know it was calculated. The funeral was small. David didn't have many friends because Tiffany had slowly isolated him from everyone. I didn't realize that until later. At the service, Tiffany played the grieving widow perfectly. She wore black, dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, leaned on me for support. I held her hand and told her we'd get through this together. I meant it. She was my daughter-in-law, the mother of my grandchildren, 7-year-old Emma and 5-year-old Jack. We were family. What I didn't know then was that Tiffany had just inherited $500,000 from David's life insurance policy. David had updated it a year before his death, making Tiffany the sole beneficiary. At the time, it seemed natural. You get married, you update your insurance. Normal stuff. I owned the house where we all lived. It's a beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Connecticut, built in 1987. My late wife Margaret and I raised our 3 children there. After Margaret died of cancer 12 years ago, the house became even more precious to me. Every room held memories. David and Tiffany had moved in with me 5 years ago when David switched jobs and needed to save money. The plan was temporary, but it became permanent. I didn't mind. I loved having family around. The house was paid off, worth about $1.2 million in the current market. It was my security, my legacy for my children. For the first 6 months after David's death, Tiffany was sweet to me. She'd make my coffee in the morning, ask about my day, sit with me in the evenings. We'd talk about David, share memories, cry together. But slowly, things began to change. It started with small suggestions. "Benjamin, you seem so lonely rattling around in this big house. Have you thought about dating? Or maybe one of those nice retirement communities?" I declined politely. This was my home. I'd lived here for 35 years. I raised my children here. Margaret was in every corner of this place. Then Tiffany started redecorating. She began with David's old bedroom, boxing up his things, painting over the walls, replacing his furniture with guest room pieces. When I asked what she was doing, she smiled and said, "We can't live in a shrine, Benjamin. We need to move forward." It hurt, but maybe she was right. Maybe I was holding on too tight. Then the photos started disappearing. Pictures of David from the mantel, from the hallway, from the living room. One day I noticed they were gone and asked Tiffany about them. She looked at me with concern and said, "Benjamin, you put those away yourself last week. Don't you remember? You said looking at them made you too sad." I didn't remember that at all. But she seemed so certain. Was my memory going? I started to doubt myself. Tiffany began inviting her friends over constantly. They'd take over the living room, drink wine, laugh loudly. When I'd come downstairs in my own home, they'd look at me like I was intruding. Once, I asked if they could keep it down because I was trying to read. Tiffany rolled her eyes and said, "David would want me to be happy, Benjamin. You wouldn't want me to just sit around mourning forever, would you?" I felt guilty for even asking. She started commenting on my age, my memory, my habits. "You forgot to turn off the stove again, Benjamin. Had I? You asked me that same question yesterday. Did I? You're getting confused more and more. Was I? The doubt crept in like poison. Maybe I was losing my edge. I was 67 after all. Around month 6, things escalated. Tiffany suggested I should sign a power of attorney, just in case something happened to me. "You're getting older, Benjamin. What if you have a stroke or something? Someone needs to be able to handle your affairs." It made sense when she said it, but something in my gut told me no. I refused. Her face changed for just a second, a flash of anger, but then she smiled and said, "Of course, whatever you're comfortable with." After that, her warmth evaporated. She became cold, dismissive. She'd walk past me in the hallway without speaking. She'd make dinner for herself and the kids, but not for me. When I'd ask if everything was okay, she'd snap, "I'm fine. You're just being paranoid." But I wasn't imagining it. The shift was real. Then money started disappearing from my checking account. First, it was $3,000. I noticed it on my monthly statement and confronted Tiffany. She looked shocked and said, "Benjamin, you withdrew that yourself 2 weeks ago. You must have forgotten." I insisted I hadn't. She went to her purse and pulled out a withdrawal slip with my signature on it. "You gave this to me to deposit, remember? But I guess you already spent it. Are you feeling okay? This memory thing is getting serious." I stared at that withdrawal slip. The signature looked like mine, but I had no memory of writing it, no memory of spending $3,000. Was I losing my mind? The fear was real and growing. I decided to call my other children, Thomas and Sarah. Thomas is 42, lives in Boston, works in finance. Sarah is 39, lives in Chicago, teaches high school. I called Thomas first and tried to explain what was happening. He listened quietly, then said, "Dad, Tiffany actually called me last week. She's worried about you. She thinks you're becoming difficult and maybe a little paranoid. Is this about the power of attorney? Because honestly, it might not be a bad idea." I felt betrayed. I called Sarah next. Same story. Tiffany had already gotten to her, planted seeds of doubt about my mental state. Sarah gently suggested that maybe I should consider assisted living. "Not a nursing home, Dad. Just a nice community where there's support if you need it. Tiffany says you're struggling, and we're worried." I hung up feeling more alone than I'd felt since Margaret died. My own children didn't believe me. Tiffany had poisoned them against me, and she'd done it so skillfully that they thought they were helping. More money disappeared over the next 6 months. 5,000 here, 7,000 there, another 8,000. Each time, Tiffany had a withdrawal slip with my signature. Each time, she looked at me with pity and concern. "You're getting worse, Benjamin. We need to do something about this." By month 18, $20,000 was gone. My checking account was bleeding, and I couldn't prove I wasn't the one spending it. Then came the final confrontation. I'd been checking my bank account obsessively by then. I saw another withdrawal, $10,000. I stormed into the kitchen where Tiffany was making breakfast. "This ends now," I shouted. "I know you're stealing from me, and I'm going to the police." Tiffany put down her coffee cup slowly. Her face transformed. The mask of the concerned daughter-in-law fell away, and underneath was something cold and calculating. "Go ahead, old man. They'll think you're crazy, just like everyone else does. Do you really think anyone will believe a senile old fool over me?" I demanded to see proof that the house was still mine. I'd owned it outright since 1992. Tiffany smiled, walked to the study, and returned with legal documents. She slapped them on the kitchen table. "Read it and weep," she said. I looked at the papers. They were deed transfer documents, showing the house had been transferred from my name to hers. The transfer was dated 1 week before David's death. My signature was at the bottom. But I never signed these papers. I never transferred anything. "That's not possible," I whispered. "I never signed this." "Really?" Tiffany leaned close. "Because the county records say you did. The notary's stamp is right there. It's legal, it's binding, and this house is mine now. You're just an unwelcome guest." That's when she screamed it. "It's my house now. Old man, get out, get out." She grabbed my arm and physically pushed me toward the door. I was too shocked to resist. She shoved a small bag at me, the one I'd packed for a weekend trip months ago that I never took. She pushed me out the door, and it slammed behind me with such force that the windows rattled. I stood on my own porch, a stranger in my own home. Neighbors were watching from their yards. Mrs. Patterson across the street put her hand over her mouth. But no one came to help. They'd probably heard Tiffany's version already. Crazy old Benjamin losing his mind, harassing his poor widowed daughter-in-law. But here's what Tiffany didn't know. 3 days before this moment, I'd made a phone call, a very important phone call, because despite what everyone thought, my mind was sharp, and I'd been gathering evidence. I'd noticed things about David's death that didn't add up. I'd found documents, I'd made connections, and I'd reached out to someone who could help. So as I stood on that porch, homeless and humiliated, I smiled, because I knew something Tiffany didn't. The buyer was coming, and when that buyer arrived, everything would change. I spent the first hour walking aimlessly through my neighborhood. The November air was cold, biting through my thin jacket. I'd been kicked out with nothing but a weekend bag, containing some clothes, toiletries, and my wallet. No phone charger, no important documents, no proof of anything. Just me, and the growing realization of how completely Tiffany had outmaneuvered me. But I wasn't going to give up. My first stop was the office of Roger Patterson, a family law attorney whose billboard I'd seen on Route 9. His office was in a modest building downtown, and I didn't have an appointment, but the receptionist took pity on me when she saw my face. I must have looked desperate. Roger was in his 50s, balding, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened to my story with increasing concern. When I finished, he pulled up the county records on his computer. "Let's see what we're dealing with here," he said, typing rapidly. The screen loaded, and Roger's expression darkened. "Mr. Benjamin, according to the county clerk's office, there was indeed a deed transfer recorded 8 months ago. The property at 214 Maple Street was transferred from you to Tiffany Harrison on March 15th. That's 1 week before your son's death." "But I never signed anything," I protested. "She forged my signature." Roger zoomed in on the digital image of the deed. The signature appears legitimate. There's also a notary stamp from a Patricia Clements, a licensed notary in this county. This document was processed through proper legal channels. My hands were shaking. It's a forgery. It has to be. I never transferred my house. I never even discussed it with anyone. Roger leaned back in his chair. "Proving forgery is extremely difficult and expensive, Mr. Benjamin. We'd need to hire a handwriting expert, which costs anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. We'd need to depose the notary, file motions with the court, and potentially go to trial. Even with all that, if the signature is a skilled forgery, it might be nearly impossible to prove. The courts generally presume notarized documents are legitimate." "How much would all this cost?" I asked, though I already feared the answer. "My retainer for a case like this would be $15,000, and that's just to start. Total costs could easily reach $50,000 to $70,000, and that's if things go smoothly. If Tiffany fights back with her own attorneys, which she certainly will, costs could double." I pulled out my wallet and looked at my bank balance on the small receipt I'd kept. $800. That's all I had left after Tiffany's systematic theft. "I don't have that kind of money," I admitted. Roger's face was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Mr. Benjamin. I wish I could help you on a pro bono basis, but I have overhead, staff to pay. Without funds, your legal options are extremely limited." I left his office feeling defeated. But I wasn't done yet. My next stop was First National Bank, where I'd been a customer for 30 years. I needed to understand exactly how much Tiffany had stolen and whether I could stop her from taking more. The branch manager, Carol, had known me for years. She'd processed my mortgage payoff in 1998, helped me set up savings accounts for my grandchildren, always sent me a Christmas card. When I explained why I was there, her professional smile faded. "Let me pull up your account history," she said, typing on her keyboard. Her eyes scanned the screen, and I watched her face change. "Mr. Benjamin, over the past 18 months, there have been numerous withdrawals totaling $73,000. The number hit me like a physical blow. $73,000, my entire savings, gone. "I didn't authorize those withdrawals," I said. "It was my daughter-in-law. She forged my signature." Carol clicked through more screens. "I can show you the withdrawal slips. They all bear your signature." She printed several and slid them across the desk. I looked at them. Each one had my name, my signature, my account number. The handwriting was eerily similar to mine. "Do you have security footage?" I asked desperately. Carol hesitated, then pulled up video files. She showed me footage from several of the withdrawal dates. In each one, Tiffany approached the teller window with a signed slip. The teller processed it without question. Why would they question it? Tiffany lived with me. She had my account information. The signature appeared legitimate. "I want to report this as fraud," I said. "I want to freeze the account." Carol nodded. "I'll start the fraud investigation process, but I need to warn you that these cases take weeks or sometimes months to resolve. In the meantime, we can freeze the account, but that means you won't have access to it either." "Do it," I said. "Whatever's left, freeze it." Carol made the changes, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Then she frowned. "Mr. Benjamin, I'm showing a transfer that was initiated this morning. $4,000 was moved to an external account ending in 7392. That was your remaining balance. The account is now at zero." I felt the floor drop out from under me. While I'd been walking around in shock, Tiffany had cleaned out the last of my money. I was completely, utterly broke. "I'm so sorry," Carol said quietly. "We'll investigate, but recovering stolen funds is a long process, and there's no guarantee." I walked out of the bank in a daze. No money, no home, no family support. I was 67 years old, with $800 to my name, and nowhere to go. I tried calling Thomas again from a payphone outside a convenience store. It went to voicemail. I tried Sarah. Same thing. They were avoiding me, probably at Tiffany's suggestion. She'd set the stage perfectly. Crazy, paranoid Benjamin, harassing his poor daughter-in-law, making wild accusations. Who would believe him? That night, I slept in my car in a Walmart parking lot. I'd owned a home for 35 years, raised 3 children, worked as an engineer for 40 years, saved diligently, lived responsibly. And now I was homeless, sleeping in a 2008 Ford sedan with a blanket I'd found in my bag. The November night was cold. My breath fogged up the windows. Every sound made me jump. Other cars came and went. A security guard shone his flashlight in my window around midnight, checking on me, but didn't make me leave. I didn't sleep more than an hour, and when I did, I dreamed of Margaret. She was disappointed in me. I'd failed to protect our home, our legacy. The next morning, stiff and exhausted, I made a decision. I needed evidence. I needed to get back into my house and find proof of what Tiffany had done. The house had been my home for decades. I knew every corner, every hiding spot. David had kept an office there. Maybe there was something in his files, something that would prove Tiffany's guilt. I waited until mid-morning when I knew Tiffany took the kids to school and then went to her yoga class. She was predictable in her routines. At 10:15, I watched her SUV pull out of the driveway. I waited 5 more minutes, then walked around to the back of the house. The spare key was still hidden under the 3rd stone in Margaret's garden. I'd put it there 20 years ago, and either Tiffany didn't know about it or she'd forgotten. My hand shook as I unlocked the back door and stepped into my own home like a thief. Everything looked different. Tiffany had redecorated extensively. New furniture, new paint, new curtains. It barely looked like the home I'd known. I felt like a stranger walking through a museum version of my old life. I went straight to David's office. Tiffany had turned it into a guest room, but David's filing cabinet was still there, pushed into a corner. I went through it systematically. Old tax returns, insurance documents, work files. Then, in the back of the bottom drawer, I found a folder labeled Medical. Inside were receipts and records I'd never seen before. David had been seeing doctors in the months before his death. Multiple doctors. Gastroenterologist, neurologist, general practitioner. The symptoms listed were disturbing. Severe nausea, stomach pain, unexplained hair loss, numbness in his extremities, confusion, weakness. I pulled out my phone and started photographing everything. These symptoms weren't consistent with a sudden heart attack. These symptoms were consistent with something else, something deliberate. I'd read about this years ago in a true crime book Margaret liked. These were classic signs of arsenic poisoning. My heart raced as I kept searching. More documents, more evidence. David had even written notes to himself, feeling worse. Don't know what's wrong. Tiff is worried, keeps making me special health smoothies. My blood ran cold. The smoothies. She'd been poisoning him slowly, probably putting arsenic in his drinks. I heard a car door slam. My stomach dropped. I looked out the window. Tiffany's SUV was in the driveway. She was back early. I watched her walk toward the front door, talking on her phone. I shoved the documents back in the folder and ran for the back door. I made it out just as I heard the front door open. I ran through the backyard, climbed the fence, and didn't stop running until I was 3 blocks away. My chest hurt, my legs ached. But I had evidence. I had proof. I went straight to the police station. The officer at the desk was young, maybe 25, and he looked bored as I approached. "I need to report a murder," I said, my voice shaking. That got his attention. He called over Detective Rodriguez, a stern woman in her 40s, who led me to an interview room. I laid out everything. The suspicious death, the symptoms, the medical records, the theft, the forged documents. I showed her the photos on my phone. Detective Rodriguez listened, took notes, asked questions. When I finished, she sat back in her chair. "Mr. Benjamin, these are serious allegations. However, your son's death was investigated at the time. The medical examiner ruled it a heart attack. Are you saying the medical examiner was wrong? I'm saying he was poisoned, and it was made to look like a heart attack. Arsenic poisoning can cause heart attacks. It's the perfect murder weapon." Detective Rodriguez nodded. "We'd need to exhume the body and run specific toxicology tests. That requires a court order, which requires probable cause. These medical records show he was sick, but they don't prove poisoning. They could just as easily be explained by stress, diet, any number of natural causes. But the theft, the forged deed," I pressed. "That's clear criminal activity. That's a civil matter, Mr. Benjamin. You'd need to pursue that through the courts, not through us. As for the bank withdrawals, if the signatures appear legitimate and she was living with you, it becomes very difficult to prove theft rather than authorized access." I felt my hope draining away. "So you're not going to investigate? I'll file a report, and I'll make a note about your concerns. But without concrete evidence of a crime, there's not much I can do. I'm sorry." As I stood to leave, defeated once again, Detective Rodriguez said, "Mr. Benjamin, one more thing. We received a call this morning from Tiffany Harrison. She filed a restraining order against you. She claims you've been harassing her, stalking her, and she fears for her safety. There's a hearing scheduled for 3 days from now. I'm required to inform you that you need to stay away from her and the property until the hearing." I couldn't believe it. She'd anticipated this. She knew I'd go to the police, and she'd preemptively filed a restraining order to make me look like the aggressor. She was always 3 steps ahead. "If I were you," Detective Rodriguez said more gently, "I'd get myself a lawyer for that hearing. Restraining orders are serious business." I left the police station feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Every door I tried to open slammed in my face. Every attempt to fight back made things worse. Tiffany had built a fortress around herself, and I was on the outside, powerless and alone. That night, I slept in my car again, and I wondered if that phone call I'd made days ago would actually lead anywhere, or if it had been a last desperate grasp at hope that would ultimately amount to nothing. 3 days later, I stood in family court, unshowered, wearing the same clothes I'd slept in, facing a judge who looked at me with barely concealed distaste. I'd tried to clean up in a gas station bathroom, but there's only so much you can do when you're living in your car. I looked exactly like what I was, a desperate, homeless old man. Tiffany, on the other hand, looked immaculate. She wore a conservative navy suit, her hair was perfectly styled, and her makeup was subtle and tasteful. Next to her sat Gerald Winters, one of the most expensive attorneys in Connecticut. I recognized his name from billboards and television commercials. He wore a watch that probably cost more than my car. I'd tried to get a public defender, but I was told restraining order hearings don't qualify for public representation. So I was alone, representing myself against a legal shark. The judge, Honorable Patricia Simmons, called the case. Tiffany took the stand first. Her lawyer approached with a gentle smile. "Mrs. Harrison, can you tell the court why you're seeking this restraining order?" Tiffany's eyes filled with tears. Her voice shook as she spoke. "My father-in-law, Benjamin, has been terrorizing me since my husband's death. At first I thought it was grief, so I tried to be understanding. But he's become increasingly unstable and aggressive. Can you give specific examples?" Gerald prompted. "He accuses me constantly of stealing from him, even though he's the one who's been withdrawing money and forgetting about it. He's convinced himself that I somehow stole his house, even though he signed it over to me and my husband before David died. It was a gift, and it's all documented and legal." I wanted to jump up and scream that she was lying, but I forced myself to stay silent. Let her talk. Then I'd have my chance. He's broken into my home twice, Tiffany continued. The first time, he went through my personal belongings. The second time, yesterday, he went through my late husband's files. I came home and found him in the house. I was terrified. I don't know what he's capable of anymore. Has he threatened you verbally? Gerald asked. Yes. He's told me he's going to destroy me, that he's going to prove I did something to David. He's accused me of murdering my own husband. Her voice broke. I love David with all my heart. These accusations are killing me all over again, and now I'm afraid. Afraid that his delusions will drive him to hurt me or my children. Gerald presented evidence. Text messages allegedly from my phone threatening Tiffany. I stared at them in shock. I never sent those messages. She must have somehow cloned my phone or fabricated the screenshots. But they looked real. Timestamps, my phone number, everything. Next, Gerald presented a psychological evaluation. Your Honor, Mrs. Harrison was so concerned about Mr. Benjamin's mental state that she arranged for an evaluation by Dr. Helen Morrison, a licensed clinical psychologist. Dr. Morrison has reviewed Mr. Benjamin's behavior and concluded that he shows signs of paranoid delusions and possible early-stage dementia. Her full report is submitted to the court. The judge took the report and read through it. I watched her face as she read. Her expression grew more concerned. Then it was my turn. I stood up, my legs shaking. Your Honor, everything she said is a lie. I never threatened her. I never sent those text messages. She's the one who stole from me. She forged documents to steal my house. And I believe she murdered my son. The judge's eyebrows shot up. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Benjamin. I have evidence. Medical records showing my son was systematically poisoned. I held up my phone with the photos I'd taken. This hearing is not about your son's death, Judge Simmons said firmly. This hearing is about whether Mrs. Harrison has reasonable cause to fear for her safety. Do you have any evidence that you did not send those text messages? She must have faked them somehow, I said desperately. But you can't prove that? No, Your Honor, but did you enter Mrs. Harrison's home without permission yesterday? I hesitated. It's my home. I lived there for 35 years. But according to legal documents, it's no longer your property. So did you enter without permission? Yes, but only to get evidence that. Mr. Benjamin, breaking and entering is a crime. Mrs. Harrison would be within her rights to press charges. The judge looked at me with something like pity. I'm granting a temporary restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet away from Mrs. Harrison and the property at 214 Maple Street. This order will remain in effect for 90 days, at which point we'll have another hearing. Your Honor, please, I begged. She's getting away with murder and theft. If you just look at the evidence. The evidence shows a woman who's afraid and a man who's made threats and broken into her home. Mr. Benjamin, I'm also ordering you to undergo a mental competency evaluation with the court psychiatrist. This evaluation is mandatory. If you fail to comply or if you violate this restraining order in any way, you will be arrested immediately and held without bail. Do you understand? I understood. I understood that the system was broken, that a skilled manipulator like Tiffany could weaponize it against her victims. Yes, Your Honor. As I left the courtroom, Tiffany smiled at me. Not the fake, sympathetic smile she used in front of others. This was genuine. She'd won again. The mandatory psychiatric evaluation was scheduled for the following week. Dr. Helen Morrison's office was in a modern building downtown. She was in her 50s, professional, with a neutral expression that gave nothing away. Mr. Benjamin, I'm going to ask you some questions. Please answer honestly. This evaluation is to determine your mental competency. She started with basic questions. Did I know what day it was? Who was the president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered everything correctly. Then she moved to more probing questions. Your daughter-in-law states that you've accused her of serious crimes. Can you tell me about that? I knew I had to be careful, but I also couldn't lie. I believe she poisoned my son and stole my assets through forgery and manipulation. What evidence do you have for these beliefs? Medical records showing symptoms consistent with arsenic poisoning. Bank records showing unauthorized withdrawals, a forged deed transfer. But the bank records show your signature on withdrawal slips. The deed transfer was notarized and legally processed. Isn't it possible that you did these things and don't remember? No. I remember everything clearly. She's a very skilled con artist. Dr. Morrison wrote extensively in her notepad. Have you experienced any memory problems, confusion, disorientation? No, none. Has anyone else expressed concern about your memory or behavior? I thought about Thomas and Sarah. My other children have, but that's because Tiffany has been manipulating them, feeding them lies about me. More writing. Do you feel that people are conspiring against you? I realized how I sounded. Every answer was making things worse. It's not a conspiracy. It's one person, Tiffany, who's very good at manipulating others. The evaluation lasted 2 hours. When it was over, Dr. Morrison thanked me and said her report would be submitted to the court within a week. I knew what that report would say. I knew because I understood how all of this looked from the outside. A grieving father who couldn't accept his son's death, who'd become paranoid and delusional, who was lashing out at the easy target of his daughter-in-law. The report came back exactly as I feared. Dr. Morrison concluded that I displayed paranoid delusions with persecution complex and possible early-stage dementia with confabulation. She recommended supervised living situation and psychiatric medication. That report was sent to the court, to Thomas and Sarah, and probably to Tiffany's lawyer. It became part of my permanent record, a document that would be used to destroy any remaining credibility I had. Thomas and Sarah called me the next day. They wanted to meet. We sat in a diner, the three of us in a booth, and I could see the worry and sadness in their eyes before they even spoke. "Dad," Thomas started, "we've read Dr. Morrison's report. We've talked to Tiffany. We're really worried about you. We think you need help," Sarah added softly. "Real help, professional care." I tried to explain everything one more time. I pulled out my phone and showed them the medical records I'd photographed. "Look at these. David was being poisoned. These symptoms don't match a heart attack." Thomas and Sarah exchanged a glance. That glance told me everything. They thought I was crazy. "Dad," Sarah said gently, "you're seeing patterns that aren't there. David died of a heart attack. The medical examiner confirmed it. I know it's hard to accept, but sometimes these things just happen." "Tiffany has been nothing but patient with you," Thomas added. "She's tried to help you, and you've accused her of horrible things. She's scared, Dad. She has 2 young kids to protect." "She's manipulating you," I insisted. "Can't you see that?" "What we see," Thomas said, "is our father falling apart. And we love you too much to watch that happen without trying to help." They gave me an ultimatum. Either I voluntarily entered a memory care facility where I could get help, or they would pursue legal action to have me involuntarily committed. They had Dr. Morrison's evaluation, Tiffany's testimony, the restraining order. They had enough evidence to get a court order. "Please, Dad," Sarah pleaded, "do this voluntarily. It'll be so much better than forcing the issue." I refused. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't going to let them lock me away. I left the diner, and that was the last time I spoke to my children as a free man. 2 days later, police showed up at the motel where I'd been staying, having finally used some of my dwindling cash to rent a room. They had paperwork. Thomas and Sarah had filed for emergency conservatorship and a 72-hour involuntary psychiatric hold. The officers were polite but firm. I wasn't under arrest, but I wasn't free to go. They escorted me out to a police car and drove me to Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility. As we pulled up to the grim institutional building, I stared out the window and thought about that phone call I'd made weeks ago. The voice on the other end had said to wait, to trust the process. But right now, being delivered to a psychiatric facility against my will, I wondered if I'd been fooling myself all along. Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility looked like every nightmare version of a mental hospital you'd imagine. Gray concrete walls, small windows with bars, fluorescent lights that buzzed constantly. I was checked in like a prisoner. They took my belongings, my wallet, my phone. They gave me scratchy hospital clothes and rubber-soled slippers. My room was on the secure wing, a euphemism for the place where they kept patients who were there against their will. I shared the space with 3 other men. One sat catatonic in a chair, staring at nothing. Another paced constantly, muttering to himself about radio waves and government signals. The third screamed at night, terrible howling screams that made sleep impossible. I tried to explain to every staff member I encountered that I didn't belong here. Each time they'd smile that patient, condescending smile and make notes on their clipboards. Everything I said was written down and used as evidence of my condition. Patient shows lack of insight into his mental state. Patient remains fixated on delusional narrative. Patient exhibits agitation when challenged. They tried to give me medication, little paper cups with pills inside. I refused. That was marked as non-compliance and resistance to treatment. The psychiatrist, Dr. Kumar, called me in for an evaluation on my second day. "Mr. Benjamin," he said, reviewing my file on his computer, "I see you're here on an emergency hold. Can you tell me why you think that is?" I knew this was a trap. If I told the truth, I'd sound delusional. If I lied, I'd be dishonest. My children think I need help, but I don't believe I do. Your intake notes say you believe your daughter-in-law murdered your son. Is that correct? I have evidence that suggests it's possible, yes. And you believe she's stolen your house and your money through forgery? The signatures were forged. I never authorized any of it. Dr. Kumar nodded, typed more notes. But you can't prove the signatures were forged? I can't afford the experts needed to prove it. Mr. Benjamin, I'm going to extend your hold from 72 hours to 14 days for further evaluation. During this time, I'd like you to engage with our therapeutic programming and consider starting medication to help with your anxiety and paranoid ideation. I'm not paranoid. Everything I've said is true. More typing. We'll talk again in a few days. I was trapped. Anything I said to defend myself was used as proof of my delusions. Anything I did to assert my sanity was marked as lack of insight. It was Kafkaesque, a nightmare where the very act of claiming you're sane proves you're not. But on my fourth night, something changed. A night nurse I hadn't seen before came to deliver my medication. Her name tag read Grace Anderson. She was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. "I don't take the medication," I told her. "I know," she said quietly. "But can I sit with you for a minute anyway?" She pulled up a chair. "I've read your file," she said, "and I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've seen a lot of patients, and you don't strike me as someone who's delusional." I looked at her, afraid to hope. "Then you believe me?" "I believe you believe what you're saying, and unlike the doctors here, I think that matters. Tell me your story." So I did. I told her everything, from David's death to the systematic theft to Tiffany's manipulations. Grace listened without interrupting, without that condescending smile I'd gotten so used to. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "My mother," she finally said, "was conned by someone very similar to what you're describing. A man who swept into her life after my father died, isolated her from family, manipulated her finances, and eventually she died under suspicious circumstances. I've always believed he killed her, but I could never prove it. The police thought I was just a bitter daughter who didn't like her mother's new boyfriend." "So you understand," I said. "I understand that these predators exist, and they're very good at making their victims look crazy while they play the sympathetic character to everyone else." Grace became my lifeline over the next week. She'd bring me newspapers during her shifts, let me use her phone for a few minutes in the bathroom where there were no cameras. I called that number again, the one I'd dialed before everything fell apart. A woman's voice answered. "We were wondering when you'd call again." "I'm in a psychiatric facility," I said quietly. "I don't have much time. Is it still happening?" "It's happening. The investigation is moving forward. But you need to stay alive and stay patient. Can you do that?" "I don't have a choice. The buyer will arrive when the time is right. Trust the process." I hung up, still not fully understanding what was unfolding, but clinging to that thread of hope. Grace also helped me in other ways. She smuggled in my phone for short periods, and I used it to document everything. I photographed the facility, recorded the forced medication attempts, documented the conditions. If I ever got out, I'd have evidence of what happened here. But then came the conservatorship hearing. On day 10 of my hold, I was transported to court. I hadn't been allowed to shave or shower properly. I was wearing the hospital clothes. I looked exactly like what they wanted me to look like. A mentally ill old man who needed to be controlled. Thomas and Sarah were there with their lawyer, a stern man named Patrick Howard. Tiffany sat in the back row, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, playing the grieving, concerned family member. Patrick presented Dr. Morrison's evaluation and Dr. Kumar's assessment. He submitted documentation of my harassment of Tiffany, my violation of her home, my declining mental state. He argued that I was a danger to myself and possibly others, that I was unable to manage my own affairs, and that for my own protection and the protection of others, conservatorship should be granted to Thomas and Sarah. Your Honor, Patrick said, Mr. Benjamin's children love their father deeply. This is one of the hardest decisions they've ever had to make. But they can't stand by and watch him deteriorate. They're asking the court for the authority to make medical and financial decisions on his behalf, to ensure he gets the care he desperately needs. The judge looked at me. Mr. Benjamin, do you wish to respond? I stood, my hands shaking. I'd been medicated despite my refusals. They'd started putting it in my food when I wouldn't take the pills. I was foggy, exhausted, barely able to think straight. Your Honor, I started, and my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. I'm not mentally ill. My daughter-in-law has been systematically destroying my life. She poisoned my son. She forged documents. She stole my money. I have evidence, medical records that show. Mr. Benjamin, the judge interrupted, do you have this evidence with you? It's on my phone, which was taken when I was admitted to Meadowbrook. Have you presented this evidence to the police? I tried. They didn't believe me because Tiffany had already filed a restraining order and poisoned them against me. I heard how I sounded. I saw the judge's expression. I was losing. Mr. Benjamin, do you believe your daughter-in-law poisoned your son? This was the moment. I could lie and say no, and maybe save myself. But I'd be betraying David's memory. I'd be admitting defeat. Yes, Your Honor. I have evidence that strongly suggests it. The judge sighed deeply. She'd heard enough. I'm granting the petition for conservatorship. Thomas and Sarah Benjamin are hereby appointed co-conservators for their father, with authority over his financial and medical decisions. Mr. Benjamin is to remain at Meadowbrook Psychiatric Facility for a minimum of 60 days, with treatment decisions to be made by his conservators in consultation with his psychiatrists. 60 days. 2 months locked in that place. By then, Tiffany would have sold the house and disappeared. I'd lose everything forever. Thomas and Sarah approached me after the hearing. Sarah was crying. We're doing this because we love you, Dad. You're doing this because you're being manipulated, I said bitterly. Please, Thomas said. Please, just try to get better. Accept the help. Take the medication. Engage with the therapy. We want you back, Dad. We want our father back. But their father was standing right in front of them, and they couldn't see it. They saw what Tiffany had trained them to see, a sick old man who needed to be controlled. I was taken back to Meadowbrook, and for the next week, I fell into a genuine depression. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe David really did just have a heart attack, and my grief had twisted it into something sinister. Maybe I did sign those papers and forgot. Maybe I was the villain in this story, not Tiffany. I stopped eating. I stopped talking. I sat in my room and stared at the wall. The doctors called it catatonic depression and increased my medication. I lost 15 pounds. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Then, on day 18, Tiffany visited. She signed in as family. They let her into the secure wing. We sat across from each other in the visiting room, plastic chairs bolted to the floor, a guard watching from the corner. She leaned forward and whispered so only I could hear. How does it feel, Benjamin? How does it feel to be completely powerless? I said nothing. I did poison David, she continued, her voice soft and conversational. Arsenic. Just a little bit at a time in his morning coffee. It took 6 months, but it looked like natural causes. The stupid medical examiner never even tested for it. I stared at her, my heart pounding. And yes, I forged your signature on everything. The deed, the withdrawal slips, all of it. I'm very good at forgery. It's one of my talents. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked. Because no one will ever believe you. You're a certified crazy person now. You could shout it from the rooftops, and everyone would just nod sympathetically and increase your medication. She smiled. I'm selling the house next week. $1.3 to $5 million. Plus David's insurance. Plus what I took from your accounts. Almost $2 million total. You've done this before, I said. Her smile widened. You're smarter than I gave you credit for. Yes, I've done this before. 4 times now. 4 husbands, 4 unfortunate deaths, 4 fortunes. You're looking at a very wealthy woman, Benjamin. Why? Why not? Men are easy to manipulate. They see a pretty face, and they think they're lucky. They have no idea they're prey until it's too late. She stood up. I'm moving to California after the house sells. starting fresh. Maybe I'll find husband number 5. I'm very good at what I do. She walked toward the door, then paused. Oh, and that friend of yours, the nurse Grace? She was fired yesterday for inappropriate conduct with a patient. Security cameras caught her giving you unauthorized phone access. You're completely alone now, Benjamin. Enjoy the rest of your life in here. After she left, I sat in that chair for an hour, unable to move. She'd confessed everything, and it didn't matter. She was right. I was powerless. That night, I lay in my bed and heard screaming from the room down the hall. The radio wave man was having an episode. 2 orderlies restrained him. I heard the struggle, the shouts, then silence after they sedated him. That would be me eventually. I'd be here so long I'd start to actually lose my mind. Tiffany would have won in every possible way. But then I remembered that voice on the phone. The buyer will arrive when the time is right. I didn't understand what it meant, but it was all I had left to hold on to, so I held on. Grace was gone. My only ally, the only person who believed me, had been fired and banned from the facility. In her place was a new nurse named Helen, a severe woman with no patience and even less compassion. She enforced the medication schedule with military precision. No more hidden phone calls, no more moments of kindness, just pills, routine, and endless gray days. I'd been at Meadowbrook for 32 days. Through my barred window, I watched October turn to November, the leaves falling from the trees in the courtyard. I'd lost nearly 20 pounds. My hands shook constantly from the medication. I'd developed a shuffle in my walk, a side effect they said was temporary. One day, I overheard 2 orderlies talking outside my door. That house on Maple Street? The one that belongs to the crazy old guy in room 12? It's on the market. Ladies asking $1.3 million. My buddy's a real estate agent. Says it's going to sell fast in this market. My house. My home. Being sold while I rotted in here. I felt myself giving up. Maybe this was my life now. Maybe I'd die in this facility, medicated and forgotten. Maybe in 10 years, Thomas and Sarah would visit my grave and tell themselves they'd done the right thing. Maybe Emma and Jack would grow up barely remembering their grandfather Benjamin, just a cautionary tale about what happens when grief makes you lose your mind. Then Marcus arrived. He was admitted to the secure wing on day 33. Marcus was in his 50s, a former attorney who'd had a breakdown after his wife died of cancer. Unlike the other patients, Marcus was lucid. He was depressed, yes, but he wasn't delusional or disconnected from reality. He was just a man who'd lost everything and needed time to heal. We met during group therapy, a twice-weekly session where we sat in a circle, and a therapist named Dr. Chen tried to get us to share our feelings. Most of the patients stared blankly or rambled incoherently. Marcus and I were the only ones who could hold a conversation. After the 3rd session, Marcus approached me in the common room. "You're not like the others here," he said quietly. "Neither are you," I replied. "What's your story?" I'd learned to be careful about sharing my story, but something about Marcus made me trust him. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the attorney's calculating intelligence I saw in his eyes. I told him everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, his lawyer brain processing every detail. When I finished, he asked questions. Good questions. Legal questions. Do you have any documentation of the medical records you found? Can you prove the timing of when Tiffany entered your life versus when these financial changes started? Did your son have a will? I answered as best I could, and Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "You're not crazy," he said finally. "You're being gaslit by a professional con artist. I've seen cases like this. Not often, but they exist. Black widows, they call them. Women who marry, manipulate, and murder for money. You believe me?" It was the first time anyone had said those words since Grace. I believe the pattern you're describing is consistent with serial fraud and possibly serial murder. Whether I can prove it is another question. Marcus still had his phone. The staff hadn't caught him with it yet. He hid it in a hollowed-out book in his room. Over the next few days, he let me use it in brief increments. I called that number again. The same woman answered. "Benjamin, we were getting worried. I'm still here, still locked up. What's happening?" "The investigation is moving forward. We're close. The house closes in 15 days. That's when we'll move. You need to hold on just a little longer." "Who are you?" I asked for the first time. "Someone who stops people like Tiffany." That's all you need to know right now. Marcus helped me formulate a plan. You need to get out of here, he said. Legally, you're being held against your will. Your conservators can extend your stay indefinitely. But if you escape, if you can present your evidence to the right people, you might have a chance. If I escape, I'll be arrested. You're going to be trapped here forever if you don't. What do you have to lose? He had a point. I'd been at Meadowbrook for 45 days. The house would close in 15 days. If I didn't act, Tiffany would take the money and disappear forever. Marcus and I spent 3 days planning. The secure wing door had a malfunction. Sometimes it didn't lock properly, especially after the 6 a.m. shift change when the night staff left and the day staff was just arriving. There was a 5-minute window when the ward was understaffed and chaotic. Marcus would create a distraction, a fake seizure during breakfast. All the staff would rush to him. I'd slip through the malfunctioning door, change into civilian clothes. Marcus had smuggled from the laundry room and walk out the front entrance like a visitor. Once you're out, Marcus said, you have maybe 30 minutes before they realize you're gone. Use them wisely. On day 47, at exactly 6:05 a.m., we executed the plan. Marcus collapsed during breakfast, his body convulsing dramatically. He was a good actor. All 3 nurses on duty rushed to him, calling for the doctor, calling for a gurney. I slipped out of my seat and moved toward the secure wing door. My heart pounded. I tested the handle. It turned, thank God. I stepped through, closed it quietly behind me, and walked quickly to the bathroom where Marcus had hidden the clothes. I changed in 30 seconds, shoved the hospital clothes in the trash, and walked out. The facility was enormous. I'd only seen the secure wing and the path to the courtroom. I followed signs for the main lobby, trying to look purposeful, like I belonged. 2 staff members passed me in the hallway. Neither gave me a second glance. The front lobby had a security desk, but the guard was dealing with someone signing in. I walked past, pushed through the front doors, and stepped into the cold November morning air. I was free. I started walking. I had no money, no phone, no plan beyond getting to my house. It was 7 miles away. I walked along the highway shoulder, cars rushing past me. I must have looked like a homeless person. I probably was a homeless person. It took me 2 hours to reach my neighborhood. Every step, I expected to hear sirens, to feel hands grabbing me, dragging me back, but no one stopped me. I turned onto Maple Street. There was my house, my beautiful colonial home, white with blue shutters, the garden Margaret had planted, the porch where we'd watched sunsets together, and in the front yard, like a knife to my heart, was a sign, sold. Not for sale. Sold. I stood on the sidewalk staring at that sign. I'd failed. I was too late. Tiffany had won. She'd taken everything. But I had to confront her. I had to try one last time. I walked up the driveway, climbed the porch steps, and rang the doorbell. Tiffany opened the door. Her face went from confusion to shock to rage in half a second. "What are you doing here? You escaped? Are you insane? I need to talk to you," I said. "Get off my property." She pulled out her cell phone. "I'm calling the police. You violated a restraining order. You escaped from a psychiatric hold. You're going to prison, you crazy old fool." She dialed 911 right in front of me. I heard her voice, panicked and frightened. "Yes, please, send someone immediately. The man with the restraining order, he's here. He's escaped from the mental hospital. I'm terrified, please hurry." I realized my mistake too late. I should have waited, should have been smarter. But I'd been desperate, and desperation makes you stupid. 3 minutes later, 4 police cars pulled up, 8 officers. They approached with hands on their weapons. "Sir, get on the ground, now!" I complied. I was handcuffed, read my rights, and put in the back of a patrol car. As we pulled away, I saw Tiffany on the porch, waving goodbye with a huge smile. The sold sign mocked me. The sign underneath said closing in 3 days. 3 days. I'd have been free in 3 days if I'd just waited. But I'd been impatient, and now I'd lost everything. I was taken to county jail, booked on multiple charges, violating a restraining order, escaping from psychiatric hold, trespassing. The judge set bail at $50,000. I had no money, no one to call who would help me. I was assigned a public defender named Jason Harper. He was maybe 30 years old, overworked and exhausted. He spent exactly 15 minutes with me in a small interview room. "Mr. Benjamin, you're looking at serious charges. Best case scenario, I can get you probation and mandatory psychiatric treatment. Worst case, 2 years in prison, followed by indefinite commitment to a state psychiatric facility." "You don't understand," I said. "My daughter-in-law murdered my son and stole everything from me. I have evidence." Jason held up his hand. "Stop. I've read your file. The paranoid delusions, the psychiatric evaluations, the restraining order. The more you talk about conspiracy theories, the worse your case gets. My advice is to plead guilty to lesser charges, accept the psychiatric treatment, and move on with your life." "I'm not crazy." "Then why did 2 separate psychiatrists say you are? Why did your own children commit you? Why is there a restraining order?" Jason closed his file. "Look, I'm not here to judge. I'm here to get you the best deal possible. But you have to work with me. Stop with the conspiracy stuff. Accept responsibility. Show remorse. That's your only play." He left, and I was taken to a cell in general population. I shared it with a 23-year-old drug dealer named Tyler who snored like a chainsaw. The cell was 8 by 10 feet, concrete walls, metal bunks, a toilet with no privacy. I was 67 years old, and this was my new home. The next day, I saw myself on the news. The television in the common area was tuned to the local station. "Local man arrested for stalking daughter-in-law." They showed my mugshot. I looked deranged, unwashed, wild-eyed, exactly like a crazy person. They interviewed Tiffany. She was perfect, tearful, vulnerable, frightened. "I've been terrorized for months by my father-in-law. After my husband died, Benjamin never accepted me. He's accused me of horrible things, broken into my home, threatened me. I've tried to get him help, but he refuses treatment. I'm just grateful the police caught him before he could hurt me or my children." The reporter was sympathetic. "Must be difficult dealing with mental illness in the family." "It is. I love Benjamin. He's my children's grandfather. But I have to keep my family safe." They showed clips of Thomas and Sarah, interviewed earlier. Both looked sad and defeated. Thomas said, "Our father is sick. We're heartbroken, but we support Tiffany completely. She's been nothing but patient with him." Sarah added, "We just hope Dad gets the help he needs. We want him to get better." The news mentioned that the house had sold for $1.3 to $5 million, and that Tiffany planned to move to California to start fresh and heal from this trauma. Other inmates watched the news with me. One of them, a muscular guy with tattoos, laughed. "You really stalked some lady, old man?" I didn't answer. What was the point? That evening I had another visitor, Tiffany. She'd come to gloat one final time. We sat across from each other in the visiting room, a guard standing nearby. She looked radiant, happy, victorious. "The house closes tomorrow at 10 a.m., she said quietly. "I'll have $1.3 to $5 million in my account by noon, plus David's insurance money, plus what I took from you. Almost $2 million, Benjamin. Can you even imagine?" "You won't get away with this," I said. But even I heard how weak it sounded. I already have gotten away with it. 4 times now. 4 husbands. 4 deaths. 4 fortunes. I've perfected my craft. She leaned closer. "Do you want to know what David said at the end? When he knew he was dying? I didn't want to hear it, but I couldn't stop her. He said, 'Please, Tiff, I don't want to die. I have kids. Please.' He was crying. He begged me to stop putting the arsenic in his coffee." She smiled, but I didn't stop. I kept poisoning him every single morning until his heart finally gave out. And the best part? The medical examiner never even tested for it. Natural causes, case closed. I felt tears running down my face. My son, my beautiful son. He died begging for his life while this monster watched. Goodbye, Benjamin. Enjoy prison, or the psychiatric ward. Wherever you end up, you'll be there for the rest of your life. She stood up, smoothed her skirt, and walked out. That night, in my cell, I couldn't sleep. Tyler snored next to me. Somewhere in the jail, someone was yelling. The fluorescent lights hummed. Tomorrow, Tiffany would close on the house and disappear. My son's killer would walk free with millions of dollars, and I would spend whatever remained of my life in prison or locked in a mental ward. I'd lost. Completely, utterly, devastatingly. There was no hope left. But then I remembered. The phone call. The voice. The buyer will arrive when the time is right. Tomorrow was the closing. Tomorrow the buyer would appear. Whatever that meant, it was my last thread. I held on to it even though I didn't understand it. Because what else did I have? Morning came slowly in county jail. The lights turned on at 5 a.m., harsh and sudden. Breakfast was powdered eggs and stale toast served on a plastic tray. I barely ate. Today was the day. 10 a.m., Tiffany would close on my house. By noon, she'd have nearly $2 million and would disappear forever. I'd been moved to a different cell after the news coverage. Apparently, having a dangerous stalker in general population raised security concerns. My new cell was smaller, more isolated. A single-occupant cell in a section they called administrative segregation. Basically, solitary confinement with a nicer name. I had nothing to do but sit and think. Think about David begging for his life. Think about how completely Tiffany had destroyed me. Think about how Thomas and Sarah would live the rest of their lives believing their father had gone insane. Think about Emma and Jack growing up without ever knowing the truth about their mother. At 9:30, a guard came to my cell. "Benjamin, you have a visitor. Court liaison." I was confused. Jason Harper wasn't scheduled to meet with me until tomorrow, but I was handcuffed and led to the visiting room anyway. Sitting at the table was a woman I'd never seen before. She was in her 50s, professional, with sharp eyes and an air of authority. She wore a dark suit with a badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. Benjamin, I'm Special Agent Diana Crawford with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to talk." My heart started pounding. FBI? 7 weeks ago, we received a tip on our fraud hotline. A caller provided detailed information about a woman named Tiffany Morris, also known as Tina Bradford, Teresa Morgan, and Teresa Matthews. The caller told us this woman had been systematically marrying wealthy men, poisoning them, forging documents, and stealing their assets. The caller provided names, dates, locations, and patterns spanning 12 years and 4 victims. Your son David was the 4th. I couldn't breathe. Who called? We'll get to that. The point is, we investigated. Everything the caller told us checked out. 4 dead husbands in 4 different states. 4 estates that transferred to Tiffany through suspicious circumstances. 4 medical examiners who ruled natural causes without testing for poisons. We've been building a case against her for 7 weeks. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. Because you were a suspect's father-in-law making wild accusations. If we'd revealed our investigation to you, Tiffany might have found out and fled. We had to keep it quiet. We had to let things play out while we gathered evidence. So you let me get committed to a psychiatric hospital? Let me get arrested? Let me lose everything? Agent Crawford's expression softened. I'm sorry for what you've been through, but we had to ensure our case was airtight. These types of criminals are extremely clever. One misstep, and she'd be gone, and we'd never catch her. We needed time. The house closes in 30 minutes, I said. She's going to take the money and run. Actually, that's why I'm here. We're ready to move. There's a hearing scheduled this morning at 10:15. Tiffany will be there for the closing. So will we. Agent Crawford stood. You're being released immediately. All charges dropped. Your conservatorship is being dissolved. And you're going to be there when we arrest her. I couldn't process it. After weeks of hell, suddenly everything was reversing. I don't understand. Who called the FBI? How did they know? The buyer will explain everything, Agent Crawford said. Come on. We have a car waiting. I was processed out of jail in a blur. My belongings were returned. Agent Crawford drove me to the courthouse in an unmarked sedan. We arrived at 9:55. The closing was scheduled in conference room 3. Wait here, Agent Crawford said. We'll go in at 10:15 after she signs the documents and thinks she's won. Then we'll make the arrest. I waited in the hallway, my heart hammering. At 10:05, I saw Tiffany arrive with her lawyer, Gerald Winters. She looked beautiful and confident, carrying a designer purse, wearing expensive clothes. She walked into the conference room without seeing me. At 10:15 exactly, Agent Crawford nodded to 4 other agents who'd been waiting. Let's go. We walked into the conference room. Tiffany was signing documents, smiling, chatting with the title company representative. When the door opened, she looked up. She saw the FBI badges, and her face drained of all color. Tiffany Morris. Agent Crawford said formally, also known as Tina Bradford, Teresa Morgan, and Teresa Matthews. You're under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, forgery, and 4 counts of first-degree murder." Tiffany jumped up. "This is a mistake. I haven't done anything." 2 agents moved to either side of her. "You have the right to remain silent." "No. No, this is insane. Benjamin, tell them. He's crazy. He's been stalking me." Tiffany tried to run, but the agents grabbed her arms. They handcuffed her while reading her rights. Gerald Winters stood there, stunned, saying nothing. The title company rep backed away from the table. Tiffany was screaming, thrashing, demanding her lawyer, insisting this was a misunderstanding. Agent Crawford turned to me. "Mr. Benjamin, all charges against you are dropped. Judge Simmons has been briefed on the situation. Your conservatorship is dissolved. The house sale is voided. All your assets are being restored." I watched as they dragged Tiffany out of the conference room. She was still screaming, still insisting she was innocent. Her perfect mask had finally cracked, and underneath was pure rage. But I still didn't understand. "Who called the FBI?" I asked again. "Who knew?" Agent Crawford checked her watch. "The buyer should be at your house right now. Go home, Mr. Benjamin. All your questions will be answered there." A police officer drove me home. My home. I'd thought I'd never see it again. As we pulled onto Maple Street, I saw the SOLD sign being taken down by a real estate agent who looked very confused. And standing on my porch, waiting for me, was Grace. Grace Anderson, the nurse from Meadowbrook, the one who'd been fired, the one who'd believed me when no one else did. I got out of the car and walked toward her, my legs shaky. "Grace, you're the buyer? You called the FBI?" She smiled. "I didn't just believe your story, Benjamin. I investigated it. Let's go inside. I'll explain everything." Grace and I sat in my living room. My living room. I was home. After everything, I was actually home. It didn't feel real. Nothing felt real. "I need to tell you about my mother," Grace began. Her name was Patricia Anderson. 10 years ago, she met a man named Richard Cole at a grief support group after my father died. Richard was charming, attentive, perfect. They married within 6 months. A year later, my mother died of what the doctors called a sudden stroke. Richard inherited everything, almost $400,000. "I never believed it was natural," Grace continued. "My mother was healthy, but I was just a daughter with suspicions. No one listened. Richard disappeared, changed his name, moved away. I've been looking for him ever since, trying to prove what he did. I became a nurse partly because I wanted to understand medical manipulation, how these killers work. When you told me your story at Meadowbrook, every alarm bell went off. The pattern was identical. The isolation, the financial manipulation, the sudden death, the gaslighting of family members. I knew immediately you were dealing with the same type of predator. I used my nights off to research Tiffany. I'm good with computers, and I know how to dig. I found her previous identities. Tina Bradford married a man named Robert Bradford in Oregon in 2012. He died of a heart attack in 2013. She inherited $300,000. Teresa Morgan married James Morgan in Nevada in 2015. He died of kidney failure in 2016. She got $550,000. Teresa Matthews married William Matthews in Arizona in 2018. He died of a stroke in 2019. She walked away with $700,000. I stared at Grace in shock. 4 husbands before David? 4 murders. Same pattern every time. Quick courtship, isolation of the victim, gradual poisoning, forged documents, inheritance. Then she disappears and reinvents herself in a new state with a new identity. How did you find all this? Death certificates are public record. Marriage licenses too. I looked for patterns. Women in their 30s, marrying men with assets who then died within a year or two. Once I had the names, I found obituaries, financial records, property transfers. It took me 3 weeks of obsessive digging, but I built a complete timeline. Then I called the FBI's fraud hotline. I gave them everything. Names, dates, locations, the whole pattern. I told them about David and about you. I told them to investigate before she could kill again, because she would definitely kill again. The FBI agent I spoke to took me seriously. She said they'd investigate, but she also said they needed time to build a case. They needed to gather evidence, interview people, get court orders to exhume bodies for toxicology tests. They needed to do it quietly so Tiffany wouldn't run. That's why they couldn't tell you. If Tiffany had any hint that the FBI was investigating, she'd disappear. These people are professionals. They have escape plans, fake identities ready, money hidden offshore. The FBI had one chance to catch her, and they couldn't blow it. I felt overwhelmed. You saved me. You saved my life. After they fired you from Meadowbrook, I thought I'd lost my only ally. They didn't fire me, Benjamin. That was part of the plan. Agent Crawford suggested I go undercover, get close to Tiffany, gain her trust. So I pretended to be fired for helping you. I reached out to Tiffany, told her I thought she was brave for dealing with a difficult father-in-law. I befriended her. You pretended to be her friend? I told her I was interested in buying the house. That's why I'm the buyer. I went to showings, asked questions, spent time with her. And she talked. Benjamin. She couldn't help herself. She's a narcissist. She thinks she's smarter than everyone. After a few glasses of wine, she started bragging. I was wearing a wire the entire time. The FBI has recordings of her admitting to poisoning David, admitting to forging your signature, admitting to her previous marriages and murders. She confessed to everything because she thought she was talking to a friend and admirer. She thought she'd already won. I started crying. I couldn't help it. Weeks of hell, of being told I was crazy, of losing everything, and now vindication. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you. Grace took my hand. You never gave up. Even when everyone else thought you were delusional, you knew the truth. That takes incredible strength. Over the next few days, everything unfolded rapidly. Thomas and Sarah arrived at my house, both crying, apologizing over and over. Dad, we're so sorry. We should have believed you. We should have listened. I hugged them both. She manipulated you. That's what she does. She's a professional predator. You're not to blame. We had you committed, Sarah sobbed. We let them lock you up. We thought you were losing your mind. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. Tiffany had been that good. She'd fooled everyone. Thomas and Sarah had brought Emma and Jack. The kids hugged me tightly. They didn't fully understand what had happened, just that Grandpa was home and that their mother had done bad things. They'd need years of therapy, but they'd be okay. We'd all make sure of that. The legal system moved swiftly. The FBI's case was overwhelming. They'd exhumed all 4 previous husbands and found arsenic in every body. They had financial records showing Tiffany's pattern of forgery and theft. They had recordings of her confessions to Grace. They had testimony from me, from Grace, from investigators in 4 states. Tiffany was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, multiple counts of fraud, forgery, identity theft, and a dozen other crimes. Her lawyer tried to mount a defense, but there was no defense against the evidence. 3 months later, she was convicted on all counts. I attended the sentencing. Tiffany was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked small and defeated. Nothing like the confident, beautiful woman who'd manipulated so many people. The judge allowed victim impact statements. I stood and spoke, not just for myself, but for David, for Robert Bradford, for James Morgan, for William Matthews, for all her victims. My son David was 38 years old when Tiffany murdered him. He was kind, generous, and trusting. Those qualities made him a target. She took advantage of his goodness and killed him slowly while he begged for his life. She left behind 2 children who will grow up without their father. She destroyed our family. She nearly destroyed me, but she didn't succeed in destroying me. Because there are good people in this world who fight for justice. People like Special Agent Crawford and Grace Anderson who believed the truth and worked to expose it. I hope David is at peace now, knowing his killer has been brought to justice. The judge sentenced Tiffany to 4 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. 4 life sentences. 1 for each husband she murdered. She'd spend the rest of her life in prison. As they led her out of the courtroom, she looked at me once. There was no remorse in her eyes, just anger at being caught. Some people are beyond redemption. Tiffany was one of them. My house was returned to me. My money was recovered from Tiffany's accounts and returned. My reputation was restored. The local news ran a correction story. Man wrongly committed helps. FBI catch serial killer. Mrs. Patterson from across the street brought over a casserole and apologized for not helping me that day. I forgave her too. Grace became part of our family. She had no one else in her life, and we had room in ours. She helped me raise Emma and Jack. She became like a daughter to me, and I like a father to her. We healed together. With Grace's help, I reopened my mother's case. The FBI investigated Richard Cole and found he'd done exactly what Tiffany had done. Multiple victims, multiple identities. They caught him in Florida, living under a new name, already grooming his next victim. He was arrested, and Grace finally got justice for her mother. I started speaking at fraud prevention seminars, helping other families recognize the warning signs of financial abuse. I volunteered with elder advocacy groups, helping people who'd been manipulated and isolated by predators. I turned my nightmare into something meaningful. 1 year after Tiffany's arrest, I stood on my porch watching the sunrise. Thomas, Sarah, and their families were visiting for Thanksgiving. Emma and Jack were playing in the yard, laughing. Grace was inside, making her famous pumpkin pie. The house was full of love and life again. I thought about David. I thought about Margaret. I hoped they were together somewhere, proud of me for never giving up, for fighting even when everything seemed hopeless. I'd learned that evil exists in this world. Tiffany proved that, but I'd also learned that good people exist too. People like Grace, like Agent Crawford, like Marcus, who helped me escape Meadowbrook. When good people work together, when they believe each other and support each other, evil can be defeated. I learned to trust my instincts. Everyone told me I was wrong, that I was crazy, but I knew the truth. I documented everything. I refused to give up. And ultimately, that saved not just me, but potentially countless future victims. I learned that isolation is evil's best weapon. Tiffany tried to cut me off from everyone, to make me doubt myself, to convince others I was delusional. Community and connection defeated her. When people believe you, when they stand with you, predators lose their power. Most importantly, I learned that it's never too late to fight back. I was 67, homeless, penniless, locked in a psychiatric facility, and everyone thought I was insane. It doesn't get much worse than that. But I didn't give up, and in the end, truth won. Emma came running up to the porch. "Grandpa, come play with us." I smiled and walked down the steps to join her. The nightmare was over. Justice had been served. My family was together. I was home. And that's all that mattered. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you knew the truth but nobody believed you? Have you ever been gaslit by someone who made you question your own mind? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's going through something similar. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the importance of trusting your instincts and never giving up, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more true stories about ordinary people overcoming extraordinary challenges, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You never know whose life might be changed by hearing this message. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community where we support each other and believe each other. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember that truth always finds a way to come to light.